have mixed backgrounds. Academia, industry, investors, policymakers. I see the value it creates is for you not only on the stage, you learn about things, also through asking questions, but also during coffee breaks. I see many great ideas coming out of discussion. So in this concluding remark session, I would like to ask Steve and Arun, what are the few key takeaways in the last 2 days standing out most to you?
We have 2 hours to go, right?
Oh.
Steve, you go ahead.
No. Beauty before age.
Oh boy. Ouch.
That's not an ouch.
Well, I mean, first of all, terrific meeting. Congratulations, E, and to your whole team, the staff behind the scenes for really curating this thing so well, and tremendous, audience, and despite the rain and everything. I mean, the few takeaways, the following. One is that, first of all, I'm so glad you had the international panel out here. This is an international issue. There is a global landscape of both cooperation and competition. That's a good thing. And so I think we have to acknowledge that. The second thing I would say is some of the key takeaways. At a university like Stanford, we better understand scale. Because if you don't, we may be solving the wrong problem. And I think there's no question innovation is important, but there are 2 kinds of innovation. One is going down an existing learning curve, right? And there you need supply chain, you need, for any technology, you need manufacturing, you need financing, you need policy help. That's the existing, and that is absolutely critical, whether it's electrolyzers or batteries. And for that, the scaling is very important. The second part is kind of disruptive innovation, where there's a new learning curve that is being created. New technologies are coming. Both are necessary, because if you do only one, the other one may come and disrupt you in the future. And so if I go back to our Department of Energy days, we had ARPA-E for this breakthrough innovation, and the existing applied program for sort of sustaining innovation, right? So both are necessary, and I think we need to look at both of them out here, which means understanding of scale has to be brought back to academia in our education curriculum, in our research and understanding solving the right problem, which is the accelerator part. Mm-hmm. The other takeaway is that this transition is going to be different in different parts of the world, and it's going to be, it's not going to be easy. This is the supply chain issues that we just heard are going to be rampant. These are global issues. And security, whether what we're talking about, as we heard from this amazing panel today with Condi and Mike McFall, the security issues, notwithstanding what's going on in Russia and Europe and all, the security issues are paramount. And if we ignore security and only go for climate, we may have a pushback on this. So we got to be able to do both at the same time. And that is not going to be easy. So I hate to be pessimistic about it. I'm optimist. As a researcher, you have to be optimist because most of your experiments don't work. And when it works, you've got to be optimist. But having said that, we have to be realistic about what the challenge is ahead.
Steve.
Well, let me pick up from what Arun said. I completely agree with what he said. But let me tell you, when you hear about speed and scale, it sounds okay. I understand that. Many of you might have read John Doerr's book. But let me put it to you in more graphic terms. A coal train, a train that holds coal and delivers the coal to a coal plant, is typically a mile long. They take one of those coal cars, they use 3 of those coal cars per day for a medium scale plant. They burn 3 cars per day. Okay, we heard about in the last panel about a little bit of ammonia being used for a little bit of this, and it's like half the ammonia production. You have to feel in your bones what does it really mean to have scale, because of the way we use energy, the way we depend on energy, because it's so important in making the world run, that this is a huge scale. So having said that, there's so many exciting things being done here at Stanford. And one of the things, and we kind of invented the book maybe 75 years ago on how you get, brilliant people in engineering and sciences to start industries that ended up being, landmark industries, like Hewlett-Packard, things like that, Silicon Valley and the whole thing. And we led the way. But the trouble with that is that when you have these brilliant people going to these companies, you're lucky if in 10 years you're at $1 billion. You're extremely lucky. But you're more typically 10 years, you're at a couple $100 million. And that's not going to get to scale in the time scale we now need, where if you say to yourself as an inventor of some brilliant thing, well, how do you maximize? We heard about the business model. The business model is how to maximize my wealth. And that wealth is to grow it slowly and control the intellectual property. And so what we want from the accelerators, in addition to making that better, to actually say, you know what? Give up give up most of the intellectual property, but then begin to work with a company. Consider working with a company that can throw $100, $200 million at it in a whack. Okay? It saves you 10 years. You get a smaller piece of the pie, you may get a minority piece of pie. You get a much bigger pie. But more important, if we don't get the pie, we're in desperate straits. So the speed and scale, and what I really like about the new school is the accelerator part, because that can transform things. We can make a new invention of how to get ideas out there as in the speed. The other thing I want to comment is when Arun also talked about the international scope. Now, Russia has done something that nobody might have predicted except real veterans of looking at Russian behavior for like a century or more. But in any case, what is going to happen? I do not want to see, for example, relations between the US and China get to a point where we no longer look at each other as partners in this war against climate change. And I think about it as a war against climate change, that it's, if Martians came, or maybe even worse, some space invaders of somewhere came, like odds on bet is most of the people will set aside their differences temporarily, at least, to get rid of the invaders. Okay? And so I think we have to, the thing is, we have to do something about climate change. So the international stuff does not mean we retreat on our own corners and say, I just want my security, my supply chain security, my this and that. It's all very important. But does that mean we don't work together on this major problem? And the answer has to be no. I mean, because the three biggest are EU, China, United States. There's all these others. We need it all together. And so that's the other thing that I think has to be deeply appreciated, the international scope of how important it is that we don't retreat into our separate corners and do something that will, in the end, not be good for all of us.
Yeah, Steve, completely agree. So this is second time we hold the Global Energy Forum. So 2018, first time. This is second time. And 2 years from now, we'll have a third time. So 2024, we'd like to invite you to come back. But I want to ask you, 2 years from now, what do you hope to see happening different, more of the future perspective? Maybe you can say 10 years from now, what do you hope to happen? Like near term, a little bit longer term in your mind.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we all agree that there's a colossal transition that we're embarking on, right? We're already in it, but these are early days. what would be really important is what I would say, what is a smart transition? What do I mean by that? Is that if you really want to accelerate the transition, I'm going back to scale, leveraging existing infrastructure, leveraging existing supply chains that are already in place, and leveraging them and turning that around to do something on clean transition is going to be very smart to do. Because trying to get infrastructure in place is both time-consuming and very expensive. So trying to get an entirely new thing to be installed will take time. And so I think so for example, Steve and I have talked about Darren Woods was asked, what about, what's the moonshot? And he said negative emissions, right? Well, the industry that actually does negative emissions the cheapest way is the ag industry, right? And if you look at crop residues around the world, it's about roughly 10 gigatons of CO2 per year that is captured, and we don't do anything about it. And here we're trying to put chemical plants that are at $600 a ton of CO2. That's roughly around $50 or $60 a ton. And so I think one has to think smartly and not be confined into silos, and see how can you leverage another industry, how can we leverage another infrastructure where the sunken cost is already there, and you're paying the incremental financing to actually get it done. So that would be sort of, if we can get to the smart transition and get out of our silos, I think that would be really good.
That's a great idea, Arun, for sure. And the ag sector. Steve, any wisdom?
Well, we'll do a small correction. It's not 10 gigatons, it's about 50 gigatons of agriculture crops we plant convert carbon dioxide into biomass. So it's a very, very big deal. And so, as I said in my talk, this is solar-powered carbon capture. How can you get it, you dry it out quickly, don't let fungi get at it to make methane, and figure out how to make it inert. Okay, there's a huge opportunity, but agriculture is a very tradition-bound thing. And if I watch how Pivot Bio came out, and which is this great technology, you get rid of half the fertilizer of corn, which is heavily fertilizer intensive. You need to get rid of 100% for the farmers to get really crazy about it, because now they have to spread seed, fertilizer, and microbes. They want to spread seed and microbes or seed and fertilizer. And so there are these things. But if you can do that starting with corn, wheat, all the major grains, you're going to really be disruptive, because the N2O runoff is worse than the methane from ammonia to urea in greenhouse gas effect. So how do you get this? And how do you actually transform the agriculture in 10, 20, 30 years? 10 years, the answer is no. But can we get it done in 30 or 40 years? But you got to get it to work really well, really fast, and then after that, it goes by word of mouth. And so that's where technology is going to be a key to what's going on. But we also have to think, and I just want to go back to another thing I talked about. The second agricultural revolution was policy. It was not domesticating animals. It was not finding out what to do with yeast. It was land management. You get to own the land and put a fence around it and take care of it. And so the policy part, which as a technology nerd, I was kind of ignoring until I became Secretary of Energy and began to realize, hey, without the policy, you're going to have nothing. Without the technology, you're going to have nothing. And so, again, a great opportunity for the new school.
Right.
How do you get these together?
And since neither of us are economists, we can take a few digs at economists.
Very much so.
I would say, I think Steve pointed it out, ways of measuring the metrics of economic success has to be revisited. And the question is,
GDP anymore.
The GDP or the Human Development Index is another way to do it. It doesn't capture biodiversity and others in that. So I think, how do you value human welfare and planetary welfare at the same time is something that I think we need to value. We need to come up with so that this is, it's embedded. And I really like the way, those of you who were there at the dinner with, and the conversation with Tom actually opened my eyes. And how do we think about $4 trillion per year of investment? Is that you don't think about a $4 trillion, you think about everything needs to change. And if that's the case, it's already embedded in every business. And I think that's a very powerful message that he made. And in that valuation of corporations or businesses, this idea of both human welfare and planetary welfare combined, if that could be included, I think that'll shift. It's a kind of like the policy shift for agriculture. That could shift the way we measure success.
Just to help you realize how ridiculous GDP is, the god of GDP, we've seen extreme weather events, tragic flooding, deaths, fires, and things like that. You know what? It improves the GDP. You have to rebuild. This is ridiculous. Think about that. Tear something down, build it up again. Build a building for 30 years, 50 years. Tear it down, build it a new building again. Increases GDP. Do we want more tragic floods and destruction and fires? Fires, you get to sell more carbon credits if a forest fire burns down. This is ridiculous. It has to be a new metric. And we have to get economists to say, enough is enough. Yes, it's more complicated to value the things we really care about versus just GDP, even though GDP is easy to measure.
Fortunately, we'll have some economists in our school.
Yeah,
the door school.
Yeah, very important. Hey, Steve, Arun, with all these great ideas in the last 2 days, I hope all the people here, you are inspired, you collect a lot of good ideas, you build new friendship. Now it's time for us to go back and have our action with speed and scale. At the end, let me put the slide in. I'd like to thank a number of folks. We spent 6 months to plan for Global Energy Forum. We are fortunate to have 4 co-hosts, Steve Chu, Arun, Bill Perry, and Condi Rice. We are also fortunate to have advisors to help us to design the program, Jay Precourt, and we have Ira, we have Tom Stevenson, we have Andy Kastner, we have really large number of folks, Lino, right? We have also Mike Morgan, Richard Kaufman, so John Hennessy, so really a large number of people. Also in our team, next slide, we have amazing staff in Precourt Institute. Arun and Lynn and Sally, thank you for building Precourt Institute. I just inherited these beautiful organizations from you. Let me just name a few people right here. And to get this event going, maybe I'm serving as a director if you make a film, right, make a movie. But the producer is really Cindy Williams. Cindy, would you stand up? And particularly in the last about 2-3 weeks, the text message, I don't know, tens of text messages back and forth, day and night between Cindy and me in order to get everything going. And also we have our managing directors are amazing, technically capable, interacting with industry, interacting with students and faculty. They put a lot of time behind this event, as well as many, many other staff. Probably I will not have time to name them all. Thank you so much. And I also like to thank all the volunteer students, like to thank all the speakers, like to thank all the participants for making this event successful. Thank you. I'll see you in 2 years.
Thank you, E.
Thank you.